including Irina Skira. She was thankfully able to reach her father on FaceTime. He's serving in Ukraine's military. She says he's not panicking and he's not leaving.
We're not gonna just keep, calm and quiet. We fight for our freedom, for our land, for Russia, in a way, too.
Protesters also denouncing Russia's aggression in Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and San Francisco.
Today, Ukraine. Tomorrow, Europe.
In Washington, hundreds rallying outside the White House. Also in the nation's capital, the word murder painted near the Russian embassy. In prayer, protest, and song, America's Ukrainian communities hoping this nation will do more for their country in crisis.
And what that help would look like up for debate. Some people want even more sanctions. Others seem to be suggesting they'd like to see U.S. troops involved. But one Ukrainian woman here in Chicago telling me yesterday she fears that American boots on the ground would mean World War III. And last night she told me that her sister and nephew were leaving their home in Ukraine, making their way to Poland. Joe and Savannah, back to you.
Must be a relief to them. All right, Jesse, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And now reactions pouring in from around the world as this crisis in Ukraine unfolds.
Let's go to Ali Arouzi in Tehran with more on that, including a stunning statement from the Pope. Ali, good morning.
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. Well, in an unprecedented move by Pope Francis, he went to the Russian embassy today to express his concern about the war in Ukraine. The hands-on papal gesture came on the same day that the Vatican announced he was cancelling other upcoming events because of an acute flare-up of knee pain. Usually, popes receive ambassadors and heads of state in the Vatican, but Pope Francis's break with diplomatic protocol may be a sign of his anger at Moscow's invasion and his willingness to appeal personally for an end to it. China's foreign minister has spoken with his Russian counterpart about the crisis in Ukraine. China, carefully trying to keep a balance and not upset the apple cart, didn't endorse or condemn the Russian invasion, but in a clear sign, Beijing and Moscow have edged closer together in order to counter U.S. influence. The Chinese foreign minister said that his country sees the Ukrainian problem as a complex and a particular historical state of affairs, and that China understands Russia's reasonable concern on security issues. And finally, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has brought about punitive measures from across the sporting world. Russia has been stripped of its Champions League final by UEFA over the crisis in Ukraine. The soccer match scheduled for the 28th of May has been moved from St. Petersburg to Paris. UEFA has also said that Russia and Ukraine's national club teams will play home games on neutral venues until further notice. And Formula One has also followed suit and axed the Russian Grand Prix from its calendar. The race was due to take place in Sochi on September 25th, but Formula One organizers said that it was impossible to hold the race in current circumstances. And those are your international headlines on the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, guys.
All right, Ali, thank you so much.
Coming up, if you're watching the events in Ukraine unfold from thousands of miles away and wondering how you can help, stay tuned.
Yeah, that's in a special edition of this week's Good to Know. After the break, we'll be right back.
Hallie Jackson Now, weekdays at 5 on NBC News Now.
Let's make a deal, okay? How about this? If you come out from behind your screens, I'll come out from behind mine. Deal?
Dominic, what of reports reaching us from Russian media saying that Russia is ready to send a delegation to the capital of Belarus for talks with Ukraine.
Yeah, there are signs of a diplomatic track opening. Just to pick up on what Laura was saying there, the fact that it has to be said this is an important symbolic gesture, but Vladimir Putin has already priced in the possibility of sanctions against him and his cronies. An example of that is the fact that he moved his yacht, his £73 million super yacht that reportedly is his, was moved from the Hamburg shipyard where it was being repaired before those repairs were finished a week or so ago back to Russia. And we assume that's because he was anticipating the possibility of these sanctions freezing his assets. Of course, one of his assets would be that super yacht. And Putin has made it very clear to the Russians that he's seen these sanctions coming, and he's saying that Russia is prepared for whatever Russia throws, the West throws against it. And the fact is that the threat of these sanctions has not deterred him from doing what he's doing now. But going back to that diplomatic track, yes, the Russians are saying that they are going to, or they're considering sending a delegation to Minsk, the Belarusian capital, in response to what Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, has offered, reportedly, which is to discuss the neutrality of Ukraine in return for peace. Now, what we've heard from the Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, adds a pretty important caveat to that, which is that will only happen if Ukraine accepts the demilitarization and denazification of its country, which is effectively surrender terms. So we'll have to see how the Ukrainians react to that. But there is a fledgling hope, at least, of some kind of diplomatic way out of what is emerging to be a military campaign that takes us back to World War II in Ukraine.
I understand we do have Petro Poroshenko, the former president of Ukraine, on the line. Mr. President, thank you so much for being with us. I see you on the streets now of Kyiv. Why don't you tell me where you are and what you're seeing?
First of all, thank you very much for attracting attention for the disastrous aggression Russia do against my country. We are now in the center of Kyiv, in the our battalion of the territorial defense. We are staying here, right in about 2 or 3 kilometers from here. It is a fight with Russia, who tried to penetrate to Kyiv. We have a severe fighting on the suburb of Kyiv. And with that situation, it is extremely important to have a unity of the whole world. And I would like to thank you, to thank the West to support us so far, because everybody should understand, Putin declared the war not for Ukraine. Putin declared the war to the whole world, to every single person who watching now CNN. And I think this is also a war personally to the President Biden. And Ukraine's only scene is just willing to be free, willing to be democratic, willing to return back to the European family. And I'm proud that under my presidency, we do our best to make a reform and to go out from the Soviet Union second edition, which is a dream of Putin. And we shall deal with Putin like with a man of the lost reason. And he's just simply mad. He's just simply crazy. He's just simply evil to come here to kill Ukrainian we lost now about 130 Ukrainian soldiers, and about 800 Russian soldiers were killed just yesterday under the report of Ukrainian Minister of Defense. To the European Union. And that's exactly why we shall secure Ukraine today and to support Ukraine and withstand tomorrow. And with that situation, definitely we need
Oh, this shit is sad, huh? All this shit happening in this world. It's crazy.
Tell that this is our joint fighting. We really need the sanction which make Putin weaker and which make Putin to pay for his absolutely disastrous behavior. We definitely need now SWIFT, because SWIFT start now to be the same symbol as the Nord Stream 2. This SWIFT is the symbol of our solidarity, and this is the things definitely help us. We definitely need to block Russian ships and Russian planes in the whole EU and NATO ports. We definitely need to do everything we could, and I call on the men of faith and courage in the West to come to Ukraine support today. And this is the maximum you can do to support democracy and freedom in the whole world. Please call.
I think even the president now, right, said that Putin's goal is to kill him and his family. That's his first and second goal. Like him, his family, like kids and everything. Like, it's like, what the fuck? Like, that's like crazy.
And that situation is just the only thing to keep world safe. The only thing to continue our movement.
Yo, I like how he's so calm though, and he's right there in that country right now. He's so calm. He's a former president of that country, the former president, and he's so calm.
In low, I want to inform you that my battalion has both in low and javelin, and every single shot with the Russian tank was successful and effective. This is also your part of success. Thank you.
Mr. President, if you can still hear me, I just want people to know where you are. You are in central Kyiv right now, which is here. We have had word of fighting not far from you, several miles up in the Oberland.
He's right there in the battle zone.
We just heard moments ago that U.S. intelligence sources are telling CNN there are concerns that Kyiv could fall within the next day to 4 days, at risk of falling to the Russians. Are you yourself personally armed at this point, and do you feel that you are a specific target of the Russians?
Look, I have a feeling that I am specific target of the Russians for already 8 years. And this is, means just a symbol. We are not afraid of them. And just now, while we are here, we have a report from our civil defense that in 5 minutes we will have a Russian bomber at the center of Kyiv. And we have a bomb shelter.
Oh, they got a bomb shelter, Junior. You heard? They got a bomb shelter, everything where they're at. So they good. They chilling.
Interview, because the information war which Putin made against Ukraine is the part of the hybrid war he do against us for the 8 years. And I try to do my best that world should know the truth about situation in Ukraine. We Ukrainians are not standing in line for the bread or for the cash from the bank machine. We are standing in line for the weapons. We are standing in line to give our blood to our soldiers. And with this situation, definitely we demonstrate a unique quality that we can stand against Russian aggression. We can stand against Russian occupation. We are united together with the whole world.
And again, I see you there among the territorial defense forces, and we have had word that there's been an official call from the government for Ukrainians to arm themselves with guns and also Molotov cocktails. Is that enough? Would you like to see the United States, NATO, enforce a no-fly zone over the entire Ukrainian nation?
Definitely, we should do maximum we can. President Biden yesterday to say about the cyber attack against Russian troops, to switch off his electricity, to redirect all the tank troops, and this is extremely important. And
hey, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you.
This is extremely important for us, that we feel that we are not alone. That you are.
I'm just chilling, you know, just watching news, you know. It's kind of sad. All this going on with Russia and Ukraine.
Without any reason, Putin make an attack of us, and this the maximum you can. This is the main sanction from the hell. This is direct message from the great leader of the Western world, and Putin should feel himself in the hell. This is his future. And your sanction definitely help him to feel exactly like that.
Mr. President, can you tell me what you and the group you're with right now there are armed with, and what your intention is if the Russians roll in
This
the
is
next few
very
hours?
easy. Just my assistants here. This is the short Kalashnikov.
Kalashnikov,
We
AK.
have just, let me see, maybe 4 and low on the 300 members of the Battalion of the Territorial Defense. And we have 2 machine gun, and we have more or less that's it. We don't have any heavy
And they got guns, boy. He ain't played it. He showed the guns right there on the TV and everything.
because we launched this process just a couple of days ago. And we create that for the 2 days. This is the long line of the people who want to enlist it in the battalion, but we don't have enough arms for that, and this is the only limits why the civil defense, the normal, ordinary people, sometimes never been in the army, staying in line now to join us. This is extremely touchable and extremely great demonstration how Ukrainian people hate Putin and how we are against Russian aggression. This is very clear.
How long do you think you can hold out?
Forever. I think that Putin never will catch Ukraine, despite no matter how many soldiers he has, how many missiles he has, how many nuclear weapons he has. We Ukrainians are free people with a great European future. This is definitely like that.
The former president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, thank you for being with us. Please stay safe.
Thanks a lot.
That's crazy. This shit gonna get rough. This is getting rougher and rougher. What the fuck? Man.
Good
That's
afternoon
crazy.
from Kyiv. We will be on air till 12 o'clock today with a specially extended news program. The Russian news around the Ukrainian capital is
Yo,
being
thanks for
covered.
tuning in.
This
Appreciate
morning, there are
y'all, but
reports of
what y'all think
sporadic
about
fighting
this, man? This is
between
crazy.
them, the Russian troops and Ukrainian forces in various parts of the city as civilians continue to flee en masse. We came across a large number of Ukrainian soldiers this morning manning checkpoints larger than yesterday, I should say. They were all twitchy. They are worried about Russian infiltrators. Speaking from an unknown location in the city, Ukraine's President Zelensky was defiant for his people, angry with the West for not delivering on sanctions, and thus open for the first time to talk about the neutral status of Ukraine outside NATO. Moscow is sticking to its line.
In accordance with obligations to our allies, President Putin decided to conduct a special military operation to demilitarize
man
and
Putin crazy.
denazify Ukraine, so that freed from this oppression, Ukrainians themselves could freely determine their future.
I remain in the capital. My family is also in Ukraine. My children remain in Ukraine.
And Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky appealed directly to world leaders to do more, warning that if they fail, tomorrow the war will knock on your door. President Biden has called an urgent meeting of NATO later today to discuss further action, with the West under pressure to cut Russia off from the key global finance system, SWIFT.
Good afternoon then from Kyiv, a city which is truly under siege. Russian forces are rapidly closing in, with reports of tanks and troops in a suburb just a few miles away. Ukraine has been bombarded by Russian airstrikes on cities and military bases for the second day. There have been hundreds of casualties, including civilians. Ukraine's president has urged...
Yeah, but I heard they're gonna talk though now. Ukraine and Russia, they're supposed to be talking coming up.
At the centre of the Ukrainian capital, the seat of the country's democratic government, people have been taking shelter in underground stations and basements. Just over half a mile away is the Independence Square, also known as Maidan, which in 2014 saw such violent protests against the pro-Russian government then running Ukraine. And this morning, less than 10 miles north of the city centre, video has emerged from the Obolonsky district of what's believed to be Russian armoured vehicles in the streets. Jonathan Rugman.
I could imagine what goes through their citizens' mind, when they see shit like that. Like another tank from another country, you know what I mean? This is crazy.
This was Ukraine's northeastern border last night. And though it was unclear who was bombarding whom, it seems that Russia's advance has not been without a fight. On the outskirts of Kharkiv, you can see
countries out there go through worse than us. You heard, Junior?
Western intelligence
Countries out there, they go through worse than us.
Have deserted, and that over 400 have been killed. The Ukrainians say a downed Russian aircraft hit this apartment block on the outskirts of Kyiv. 8 people were hurt, but remarkably nobody was killed. Ukrainians
Damn, nobody was killed. That's crazy.
But some 100,000 of their countrymen
see, y'all, civilian buildings y'all are hitting. Like,
advance. Much of the capital seems deserted, with Russian tanks reported to be within 20 miles of it. And Ukraine's president claims Russian special forces have already arrived with the aim of taking over.
I remain in the capital. My family is also in Ukraine. My children remain in Ukraine. My family are not traitors. They are citizens of Ukraine.
see that, yo?
Where exactly they
are,
sitting
there. The president, he's staying in his country with his family still and everything. And he's enemy number 1 and 2.
My family is target number 2. They want to damage Ukraine politically by destroying the head of state.
Audio has emerged which seems to show a Russian warship ordering Ukrainian border guards to surrender on an island in the Black Sea. They radioed back their blunt refusal, and President Zelensky says all 13 of them were then killed in a subsequent bombardment. In Moscow, Russia's foreign minister doubled down on justification for this invasion, telling the leaders of 2 breakaway parts of Ukraine that their pleas for intervention could not be ignored.
In accordance with obligations to our allies, President Putin decided to conduct a special military operation to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, so that freed from this oppression, Ukrainians themselves could freely determine their future.
This is what that freedom looks like, a downed jet in a suburb of Kiev. Ukrainians say their death toll is now over 100, with their president denouncing Western sanctions as too little too late. Ukrainians have been sheltering underground in the capital, forced from their homes by explosions, and many fearing their city is about to fall. I came with my parents and children, says this woman. Unfortunately, my husband and my brother said they didn't want to come, and they stayed at home. Thousands of others have fled to Poland, many here packing small suitcases in the middle of the night, though there's now an official ban on men aged 18 to 60 from leaving, though nothing may now save their capital from whatever the Russians do next.
Jonathan Rugman reporting. Well, joining me now also from Kyiv is the Ukrainian MP Lesia Vasilenko. Lesia, it's good to speak to you again under these very difficult circumstances. You heard what we just said there. You heard what your president said about possibly talking neutrality with the Russians. Do you back that call, that conversation?
Again, I don't believe our president said about full neutrality with the Russians. I mean, the Russians have to back out and back off from Ukraine. We cannot, in the sense that you're saying now, it seems like as if Ukraine is to go and become a militarily neutral country. No, that's impossible. But I think in order to negotiate anything with Putin and to come to any kind of agreement with him, you would have to be crazy. We've been negotiating for 8 years, and this is what we have now on the streets of Kyiv.
Yeah, I remember in 2014, they fought them back.
This is because
the Ukrainians.
It struck me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the president, your president, is talking about the possibility of neutrality in those talks with Moscow because he feels abandoned by the West.
Look, there's definitely the feeling of abandonment by the West in all Ukrainians, in fact. We know well enough, and we were sort of preparing for it, that we would be facing the aggressor on our own, in our own country, on our own land. But at the same time, what the president was saying and what all the Ukrainian people are saying is that really the West should have and could still do more. Because at the moment, it's like Ukraine is getting trashed to pieces, torn apart. We have Russian armies moving in all directions. And the West is just sort of standing by, looking on, like saying, oh, maybe it's time to do sanctions, maybe not. Oh, if we switch off Russia from the SWIFT, it's going to complicate things, oh, this, oh, that. Come on, people. This is a country of 44 million people. I'm speaking now
44
not
million.
just as a member of parliament, but I'm speaking as a mother of 3 children, as a wife, as a daughter, and I'm telling you, what we are facing is bigger than anything that Europe has seen
I agree.
since World War
Totally
II.
agree. It's the worst thing since
I mean,
World War II
the
started.
extraordinary thing here is that they were talking about cutting Russia off from SWIFT weeks ago. They were talking about personal sanctions against President Putin weeks ago. And yet today we know that the Germans, the Italians, and the French have blocked all these moves in the EU, and the Cypriots, by the way, a lot of Russian money in Cyprus. Why do you think they're doing this when the invasion is already underway?
Yeah, so sorry, I just interrupted there for a bit. I understand your question really well, because it's like, why don't you cut off Russia from the SWIFT? Well, why don't you? Because to cut off Russia from the SWIFT also means to stop buying oil and gas from Russia and all the energy resources from Russia. And I'm sorry, but if Europe would like to stop being a hypocrite for a second there, please, because claiming in 2019 and all throughout 2020 how the whole of Europe will decarbonize by 2050, we will all go carbon neutral, European Green Deal and all that, and still to be buying Russian oil and Russian gas and Russian fossil fuel resources, and that's not good, and that's not okay, that's not fair, that's not just, and that's not the truth that the European politicians are saying to their people. And the reason I say about this is because the SWIFT system is primarily used to pay for Russian fossil fuels and to pay for Russian commodities that are bought by European markets. So to cut off Russia from the SWIFT, why Ukrainians want to cut off Russia from the SWIFT so much? Because that will leave Russia in isolation without the markets. And Russia knows very well, and that's why they say in all their negotiations, yeah, go on, cut us off from the SWIFT, see what comes out of this. So my appeal to everyone who's a decision maker in Europe and the US and the world is to actually face the truth that we have a major aggressor in the world at the moment who is blackmailing everyone and playing everyone. Please choose your priorities and choose your principles. You are for lives, for saving lives and democracy, or you are for money and commodities?
Okay, finally and briefly, let's say, if I may, what are you telling your kids about this? I don't know how old they are, but what are you saying to them right now?
My oldest is 8. And then that's my son, and then I have 2 girls. One is 6 and one is 9 months. She's turning 9 months on Wednesday. What do I tell them? My biggest challenge is to keep calm and have a smiling face when I approach them and when I talk to them about whatever we're going through and whatever can happen. And I think that is the biggest challenge for all Ukrainian mothers out there.
I can imagine. Lesya Vasilenko, good luck to you and your family. Thank you very much again for speaking to us and keep in touch. Well, there are reports of Russian troops meeting stiff resistance here and there, while Ukraine's defense ministry has called on all citizens to join the armed forces, saying there is now no age limit on joining up. Men have now been banned from leaving the country under Ukraine's mobilization laws. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum, is in Dnipro. Lindsay.
Matt, here in Dnipro, people are worried that they are next. What you are experiencing in Kyiv now is what they're going to have soon. I think you can see behind me, shop has been boarded up. This morning we went to a recruitment centre where we met some of those men you were just talking about. They were all sorts of different kinds of guys. One was a government officer, one was somebody who worked in IT who I was chatting to. But they were very serious, I would say, even though they're older than you would expect for joining the military. One was 46. I saw one guy who looked like he was over 60, which is supposed to be the cut-off age. But they were very clear, and one of them said to me, I want to kill Russians. And
I don't blame them. I want to kill Russians too. Like,
we're talking about missiles. He said,
that's
yes,
their country. That's where they were born, raised
but
to
if
protect.
They come
like,
and
what's
try
wrong with
and
them people?
seize this town, his town, then there will be fighting in the streets. And that, they say, is the moment when they will come into their own. Now, some of this you might say is heroics. But, you know, there is, as you would expect, when your country is invaded, a massive surge of patriotism and a massive surge of anger about what is going on. That this is a sovereign democratic country that's being invaded by Russia. The other thing which was really interesting is that President Putin yesterday was talking about denazification. Why does he say that? Because Ukraine was occupied by the Nazis in the second part of World War II. We met two Jewish guys at the recruitment center, a father and a son. They think we're Nazis, he said. He thinks that President Zelensky, who's also a Jew, a Russian-speaking Jew, is a Nazi. He's crazy, they said. And they said, we're going to fight.
Lindsay, thank you very much indeed. Stay safe. Let's go to Jackie in the studio. Jackie.
Well, President Biden has called an urgent summit of NATO leaders later to discuss the next steps. Britain has thrown its weight behind moves to cut Russia off from the global banking system SWIFT. While the Kremlin says President Putin will meet the UN Security Council today and warned that Moscow would impose its own retaliatory sanctions on the West. Here's Jane Deeth.
Stop Putin, stop war! The chant went up on the streets of Europe's cities last night, from Budapest to Paris to Portugal. This was Lisbon. As they protested against the Russian leaders' invasion of Ukraine, in Brussels, the European Union's leaders were in emergency summit. What would they do to try to put Putin off his stride?
The European Union stands united. Tonight, European leaders were fully aligned in condemning the atrocious and unprovoked attacks. Now we have to meet the moment. We will hold the Kremlin accountable.
Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, announced a second swathe of sanctions meant to up the ante against Russia. They include a ban on the export of equipment it needs for its oil refineries.
This package includes financial sanctions that cut Russia's access to the most important capital markets. We're now targeting 70% of the Russian banking market, but also key state-owned companies, including the field of defense. And these sanctions will increase Russia's borrowing costs, raise inflation, and gradually erode Russia's industrial base.
But Ukraine had begged the West to go much further, to cut Russia off from the global money messaging system SWIFT, by which banks can move funds quickly across borders. Denying Russia access would make it harder for it to get paid for its oil and gas exports. The UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace wants SWIFT turned off for Russia.
Well, the UK led in Europe on lethal aid, defensive lethal aid for Ukrainians. We continue to do everything we can to support them. We not only with trying to be sort of leading on sanctions and trying to get other countries to support us in getting Russia out of the SWIFT system, but also making sure that we do everything we can to equip them to protect themselves.
But the UK has an uphill battle persuading some nations, including Germany, that banning Russia from SWIFT will work. They believe it will hurt their own trade while Russia will try to find a workaround. Although the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz appeared to concede, sanctions haven't stopped Russia. In addition to the sanctions, we've also continuously tried to use diplomatic means to dissuade Putin from this wrong path. This didn't work, and he has now opted to take a war to Ukraine. But he will not win this war, because the citizens of Europe want peace and the rule of law and democracy, and the citizens of Ukraine have shown this clearly and unambiguously. Germany thinks pulling the SWIFT lever should be held in reserve for now as part of a future third tranche of sanctions. And President Biden says targeting Russian banks directly will cause Putin more pain. The Kremlin's replied any problems the sanctions cause can be resolved. Even as the invasion unfolds, there is talk of talks. Ukraine said it wants peace and is ready to speak to the Kremlin. Moscow has welcomed that, but said its expectations of Kiev remain unchanged.
Jane Defair, well, earlier I spoke to the EU ambassador to the UK, Joël Valdalmeida, and started by asking if he feared the EU and the West is impotent in the face of Russian aggression.
Well, first of all, I feel that I owe a word of solidarity with our Ukrainian friends. They have been the victims of an unprovoked, unjustified, unlawful aggression by the Russian leadership and the Russian regime. And this is the first word that comes to mind, and our thoughts are with our Ukrainian friends in these very difficult moments. But we need to act, and we are acting with great resolve. Not only us, European Union, but together with partners like the United Kingdom or the United States or Canada, Australia, Japan and beyond. There's a coordinated effort to send a very clear message to the Russian leadership. This cannot go on. Most importantly, we are acting on the economic front, and we just adopted an unprecedented package of sanctions.
You talk about an unprecedented package of sanctions, you talk about great resolve, yet here we are, Russian missiles raining down on Ukraine, people dying, fleeing their homes, the very real prospect of a European capital falling to aggressors within days, if not hours.
Dark hour for Europe, clearly so. But let me be very clear, this is the sole responsibility of the Russian leadership.
Yes, but as you say, you have to act. You say this is a show of strength, and yet look at what is happening on the ground.
It is a show and a very clear message that we are determined to exercise pressure, unprecedented pressure, on the Russian regime. We adopted a package of sanctions which is, again, unprecedented. I've never seen this in my already long life as a European diplomat. We are attacking 5 sectors, key sectors. We are hitting and hurting the heart of the Russian regime.
Yes,
we
sorry
are
to interrupt
preventing
you, but
them from...
you will not implement one of the key sanctions the Ukrainians are asking for, which is to remove Russia from the SWIFT banking system.
I don't think we should focus excessively on a single message. If you look at what we have done on the financial side of this package, which is a very important element of it, we are basically attacking and impacting upon 70% of the Russian banking system. We are actually preventing them from accessing to financial means to support the war effort.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
you
say let's not focus on this one measure. Ukraine's foreign minister is literally begging you to do this in really desperate terms. You know that he has said those who refuse to do this will have the blood of Ukrainians on their hands.
I think we should look at the entirety of our package, touching on key sectors of the Russian economy and key sectors for the Russian regime: energy, finance, technology, visas, transport. 5 key sectors.
But yet you know, you will have heard the Ukrainian president say, this morning we are defending our state alone, and the world's most powerful forces are watching us from afar. I wonder, when you hear that, do you feel a tinge of shame or embarrassment?
I feel a strong sense of condemnation of the action of the Russian regime, and that's where we should focus our attention. Within the G7, between the EU and NATO, with our transatlantic and Asian partners, and now at the United Nations. And I'd like to appeal to all the nations to concentrate their efforts in sending a very united and a very strong message to say this needs to stop.
Do you think it will be enough to stop Russian tanks rolling into Kyiv?
We have to do everything we can on our side. At the same time, we need to be very clear about who is to blame for this situation. And we are not blaming the Russian people. We are blaming the Russian leadership.
Ambassador, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you for hosting me.
Well, joining me now is the former Prime Minister of Finland, Alexander Stubb. Thank you very much for coming back on our programme again, Mr. Stubb. I just want to put this to you. The Ukrainian president, feeling very high and dry, left by the West, and obviously, you know, the Russian troops encroaching on his capital and possibly on him personally, is saying, and said just now actually, in Russian that he's prepared to talk about neutrality with Moscow. We've just had that confirmed. As someone who ran a neutral country, Finland, would you advise him to go down that road?
Well, perhaps a little correction. Finland is not a neutral country, and we haven't been since the Cold War. We don't belong to a military alliance, but we chose our football team when we joined the European Union on the 1st of January 1995, and are very in a deep cooperation with NATO and more NATO compatible than many NATO states. I would advise the president to have talks, but I would advise him obviously against neutrality. The situation is very different, and it's not that dissimilar to what I was involved with in 2008, negotiating peace in Georgia when Russia invaded Abkhazia and South Ossetia. What I like about the Ukrainian president is that he seems very calm, cool, collected, and stable in this extremely difficult situation. So I would advise for talks, but I would stay clear from neutrality.
The reason why people here think he said what he said today, especially in Russian to the Russians, is that he feels left high and dry by the West. Does he have a point?
Yes and no. I think we have to look at this from two perspectives. One is the war on the ground. And there, I must say that it is, of course, with deep sadness and fear as well that I watch the Russian troops advancing and the Ukrainian troops fighting back. The second track is actually the one that was discussed in the previous snippet there, the sanctions. They're not going to solve everything, but they are, I think, quite far-reaching as we stand. The thing is that Ukraine is not a member of the European Union. Ukraine is not, unfortunately, a member of NATO, and therefore being left alone is an unfortunate and relative reality at this particular moment.
When you put it like that, it sounds pretty harsh, but it also rings true. Do you, though, agree with the EU ambassador in London, who we heard just now being interviewed by Jackie, that enough has been done, that this is not all about SWIFT? Because here they are absolutely furious that the European Union has not taken these steps.
Well, I was listening to the conversation there earlier, and let me be clear, from my experience, this is so far the swiftest and actually the most far-reaching sanctions package that I've seen. And you have to understand that it happens in three waves. So wave number one was when Russia recognized Donbass, the region. Wave number two came yesterday, and wave number three will come. So SWIFT will be on it. Do not worry about it. But what the European Union wants to do is take it in step by step and get a clear legal basis for doing it as well. I think we're moving towards a situation whereby Russia will be fully isolated.
Okay, but step by step doesn't really work with a guy who's to send an invasion force into an entire country in one large step yesterday. So should one be much more dramatic in one's measures to try and exert a degree of punishment on the Russian president?
So the attack started a little bit over 24 hours ago, and we've implemented already a second package. There's been a lot of promise about
let's see if anything updated.
Military equipment and help coming out. You know, this is a question of hours and days. That's
we still got people walking in the street a little bit, I see. We got a couple cars, 3, 4 cars riding. So they're not there yet. Ukrainian refugees crossing into Romania after Russian invasion. All right, let's watch this. Look. kids and everything. Man, that sucks. This is live too.
Am emoționat, după aia am apărut ceva, am avut două nume. Am plătit 750 de lei. Că tot natii, lei sunt câte euro. Câte euro pe minut. Și am pus cartela asta, nu mai rămas două nume. Nu, serios, nu mai sunt. Dar și acelea lor, cum a rămas pe mine. Nu, dar nici numărul. Că numărul cu cartela ce e? Ea e bine scris pe un caiet, pe ceva, știi? Faci gândit, vin, nu vin. Așteptați pe cineva?
Da, am niște prieteni.
Pe de aici?
Nu, mai de departe.
Da, da, da. Cum am mâncat la Moldova, acolo, Dunia, Zeu, mă spune nimic acolo.
Ce?
Cum la trece, ce știu? Urmează, de ceva rămân. Am unul plecat la fix pe helicopter. Se filmează pentru noi, pentru televiziunea noastră. Dar pe nu ne lasă încolo, ne lasă?
Da. Mai găsit tot.
Bun.
Ori. Nu, aici sunteți noi cum să vă greșiți? Băiatul? Ia o pauză. Să vedem băieții de aici așteaptă pe care... Uite, mă, ești băiatul ăla de la TVR de acolo. Cu microfonul. Mai repede din există. Nu vă dată, mâncați, nu-i mai. Mâncați, că v-am dat că trebuie să luați. Nu le dau la tăți.
Acum n-ați vrea să vă aduce pălincă?
Aia mai târziu.
Oricum conduce.
Yeah, I can imagine how many people they're gonna have going there though. To Romania. Excuse me. Ooh, let's finish eating. Egg, ham and cheese sandwich. Delicious. Oh, I'll share it to my newsfeed. Hi, there you go.
Nu, mă uitam. Dau de mai în spate. Nu, am dat și lumea. Știm? Te pula.
Spatele